I should have known the moment I heard his breath hitch on the other end of the line. It wasn't a cry, and it wasn't a scream. It was the hollow, jagged sound of a 30-year-old man realizing the woman he loved was currently tearing his father's life apart with a screwdriver and a smartphone. "Dad," she broke in, Daniel whispered, his voice vibrating with a terror I hadn't heard since he was a child. "She's photographing everything, the accounts, the blueprints. She's saying things, Dad. Things that don't make sense." He couldn't even finish the sentence, but I could. I could finish it because I had been preparing for this exact moment since the second I looked into Madison Chen's eyes and saw nothing but a calculated interest in the square footage of my soul. "My name is Robert. I'm 65 years old, and I've spent the better part of 4 decades as an aerospace engineer. In my world, you don't guess, you calculate. You look for stress fractures before the wing snaps. You test the pressure before the valve bursts. I spent 40 years ensuring that things stayed held together under extreme conditions, but nothing in my professional life prepared me for the silence that followed my wife Sarah's death 7 years ago. Cancer is a thief that doesn't just take a person. It takes the color out of the walls and the volume out of the rooms. For years, it was just me and Daniel navigating the quiet. He's a good man, a civil engineer for the county, responsible, kind, and perhaps a bit too much like his mother. He sees the best in people, a trait that is beautiful until it becomes a blind spot. 6 months ago, Daniel came back from a conference in Austin with a glow that I hadn't seen on him in years. "Dad, I met someone," he told me, sliding his phone across the kitchen table. The woman in the photo, Madison, had a smile that could sell ice to a blizzard. She was 28, an interior designer specializing in luxury residential projects, or so she said. They'd met at a hotel bar, a classic setup for a romance or a hit. Within weeks, she was making the drive from Austin every weekend. By month 3, Daniel was standing in my kitchen, shifting his weight nervously. "Rent is killing her in Austin, Dad. She works remotely anyway. If she moves in here for 6 months, we can save every penny for a down payment on our own place. What do you think?" Every alarm bell in my engineering brain went off at once. High-end interior designers in a booming market like Austin don't usually struggle with rent to the point of needing to move into their boyfriend's father's house after 90 days. It was a structural anomaly. But I looked at my son, at the hope in his eyes, and I heard Sarah's voice in the back of my head. She would have told me to be the bridge, not the wall. So I ignored the math, and I said yes. Madison moved in on a humid Saturday in April. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. "I sold all my furniture," she explained with a practiced shrug. "Minimalism is a fresh start, right?" I watched her move through the house, and it felt less like a guest arriving and more like a scout surveying territory. She was polite, almost aggressively so. She called me Mr. Parker until I begged her to stop. But even then, the way she said Robert felt like she was testing the weight of the name. She spent her days in the guest room, supposedly working, and her evenings playing the part of the perfect partner. But have you ever noticed how some people don't ask questions to get to know you, but rather to catalog you? "How long did you say you've owned this place, Robert?" she asked one night over dinner. "The property values in this zip code are skyrocketing. You must have an incredible amount of equity." Then it was, "Do you have any other holdings? Daniel says you were a big-shot engineer. You must have a specialized pension, right?" Daniel would just laugh, oblivious to the predatory rhythm of her curiosity. "She's in real estate-adjacent work, Dad," he'd say. "She just thinks in numbers." But it was my workshop that really drew her eye. It's a detached garage I converted years ago, my sanctuary. It's where I keep my drafting table, my vintage tools, and my filing cabinets. It isn't just a man cave. It's the archive of my life's work. I've always kept it locked. One evening, I caught her standing by the side window, shading her eyes to peer through the glass. "What do you keep in there, Robert?" she asked, her voice light but her gaze heavy. "Daniel says even he isn't allowed in without an invite. Is there a secret car? A hidden treasure? Just old papers, Madison, I told her. The kind of things that would bore a designer to tears. But she didn't look bored. She looked hungry. Have you ever felt that gut instinct that someone wasn't who they said they were? If so, you'll understand why I couldn't just sit back and watch my son walk into a trap. I knew what was in that workshop, even if Daniel didn't. Before I retired, I developed a specialized valve system for commercial HVAC units. It was a passion project that turned into a goldmine. I patented it in 2020, and the licensing deals I signed with 3 major manufacturers brought in roughly $18,000 every single month. Over 5 years, that money had quietly grown into an investment portfolio worth well over $1 million. I lived on my pension because I didn't need the rest. I was saving it for Daniel, for his wedding, for his children, for the life he hadn't built yet. But I never told him. I wanted him to be a man who worked for his bread, not a man who waited for a dead father's check. The documents, the patents, the royalty statements, the $1 million proof were all in a filing cabinet in that workshop. The tension in the house began to thicken like smog. I caught her trying the workshop handle twice in 1 week. The second time, she didn't even look embarrassed. I thought I heard a leak, she said, her eyes scanning my face for a reaction. I was worried about your equipment. That was the day I went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty 6-digit keypad lock. I installed it while they were out at a movie. When they returned, Madison's hand went straight to the new hardware. A bit extreme for old papers, isn't it? She remarked. I value my privacy, I replied, and some of those tools are heirlooms. I saw the flicker of genuine anger in her eyes then, the frustration of a locked door. Over the next month, the mask began to slip. She started whispering in Daniel's ear about his future. She'd talk about how wasteful it was for me to live in a house this size. She suggested I take out a reverse mortgage so Daniel could get his share now. She even asked Daniel if I had life insurance. When he told me that, my heart broke for him. He was still defending her. She's just worried about us, Dad. She wants us to have a head start. I did what any engineer would do when a system starts to fail. I ran a diagnostic. I Googled Madison Chen. Her website was a graveyard of stock photos and broken links. Her LinkedIn was a fiction of gaps and ghost companies. Her Instagram was a curated lie of luxury hotels and client meetings that never showed a single floor plan. But it was a deep dive into a deleted Reddit thread that finally gave me the blueprint of the woman living under my roof. A man in Houston had posted a warning about a woman who had drained his accounts and vanished 2 weeks before their wedding. The physical description was a match. The MO was identical. She didn't just want a boyfriend, she wanted a liquidation event. I hired a private investigator the next morning. While I waited for the report, I went into containment mode. I photographed every document in my workshop and moved the physical copies to a safe deposit box. I met with my attorney and restructured my will into a 10-year trust. No lump sum. No way for a spouse to touch the principal. I'm not saying she's a predator, Robert, my lawyer said, but you're building a cage just in case. The PI report arrived 3 weeks later. Her real name was Madison Lewis. She'd been engaged 3 times in 6 years. She had $75,000 in credit card debt and a trail of broken men behind her from Dallas to Houston. She wasn't an interior designer. She was a hostess at high-end restaurants who hunted for men with pensioner written all over them. I sat in my kitchen, the paper trembling in my hands, feeling a level of rage I didn't know I was still capable of. My son was sleeping in the room next to a professional parasite. I knew I couldn't just show Daniel the report. He was too deep in the love phase. He would have seen it as an attack on his autonomy. I needed her to show him who she was. So, I set the bait. I mentioned at breakfast that I had a long doctor's appointment the following Wednesday. I'll be gone at least 4 hours, I said, catching the way her eyes darted toward the backyard. Wednesday came. I drove away at 9 a.m., but I didn't go to the doctor. I looped back, parked 2 blocks over and walked through the woods behind my property. I sat in the brush and waited. At 9:45 a.m. I saw her. She didn't have a leak to fix this time. She had a crowbar. She didn't even try the code. She went straight for the door frame, tearing the keypad off the wall with a level of violence that shocked me. I watched through the workshop window as she tore through my filing cabinets. She found the boring papers. I saw her face change as she realized what the royalty statements meant. She wasn't just looking at a house. She was looking at a retirement in the south of France. She started snapping photos frantically. That's when I called Daniel. "You need to come home, son. Now." "Dad, I'm in a meeting. Madison is in my workshop. She's taking photos of my private financial records. She's destroyed the door." 20 minutes later, the driveway was a scene of total collapse. Daniel's truck swung in, and Madison was already on the porch, the victim mask firmly back in place. She was sobbing, clutching her phone. "Daniel, your father is insane. He left the door open and I went in to check on things and he started screaming." "The door wasn't open, Madison," I said, walking out from the side of the house. I pointed to the shattered keypad dangling by its wires. Daniel looked at the damage, then at the crowbar still sitting on my workbench. His face went a shade of gray I hope I never see again. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Madison's tears stopped instantly. The switch was flipped. "Why?" she spat, her voice dropping into a cold, hard register. "Because your father is a liar. He's sitting on a fortune while we're scraping by for a down payment. He's got over $1 million in royalties from some stupid valve, and he's letting us live like beggars. He's hoarding it, Daniel. It's going to be yours anyway. Why shouldn't we have it now?" "We?" Daniel asked. "We're getting married," she shouted. "I've given you 6 months of my life. I deserve a return on that investment." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the spirit. "A return on investment?" Daniel repeated. He looked at her like she was a stranger he'd picked up on the side of the road. "Or should I call you Madison Lewis?" I asked. Her face went bone white. "I know about Houston. I know about the man in Dallas. I know about the hostess job and the $75,000 in debt. I know everything." She didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at me with a pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're going to die alone in this house, Robert. And you," she turned to Daniel, "you're just a pathetic little boy who's going to spend his life building bridges while your dad sits on the gold. You're losers, both of you." "Get out," Daniel said. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. "Daniel, baby, get out." She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She marched into the house, packed those 2 suitcases in record time, and drove away in that BMW that she'd probably scammed from the guy before Daniel. We stood in the driveway, the sound of her engine fading into the distance. "I'm so sorry, Dad," Daniel said, his head in his hands. "Don't be," I told him. "You're a man who trusts people. That's a virtue, Daniel. She's just the person who tried to turn it into a vice." We spent the rest of the afternoon in the workshop. For the first time I showed him everything. Not just the money, but the work. The sketches, the failures, the years of Sarah and I sitting at that drafting table dreaming of a future for him. "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know who you were before you knew what you were worth," I explained. "Money is a tool, but in the wrong hands, it's a weapon. He didn't want the $1 million. He didn't even want the down payment, but I gave it to him anyway. Not as a bribe, but as a foundation. 3 months later, he bought a modest 3-bedroom house. He did the inspections himself. He checked the foundations. He checked the stress points. Last week, he brought Claire over for dinner. She's a school teacher who talks about her students with a passion that reminds me of Sarah. She didn't ask about the property value. She didn't ask about my pension. She asked if she could help me pull the weeds in the garden because she noticed my back was bothering me. I still keep my workshop locked, though. Not because I don't trust the world, but because some things are worth protecting. I've learned that the most important thing an engineer can build isn't a valve or a bridge. It's a boundary. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from a mistake they weren't ready to see, you know exactly how I feel. Sometimes the best way to save someone is to let the predator think they've won, right up until the moment the trap snaps shut. If you think I did the right thing by letting Madison reveal her true colors, please like and subscribe. It helps us keep telling stories about the things that actually matter, like loyalty, legacy, and the truth that eventually always comes to light. Would you like me to tell you what happened when Madison tried to call Daniel 2 months later?